When a heart is broken, when grief has pierced the very core of a person's being, there is an instinct to believe that nothing, no word, no promise, no touch, could ever reach the shattered places. Pain convinces us that healing is impossible, that our sorrow is too deep, too unique, too final. Yet God, who formed the heart, also speaks to the heart in a language no wound can silence. There is a word he uses, a word that is not merely sound or syllable, but living truth, and that word is love. Love is not the frail sentiment we often mistake it for, nor is it the fleeting warmth that drifts away when trials come. The love of God is a force beyond comprehension, a reality that penetrates even the darkest chambers of our despair. It does not erase the memory of loss, nor does it deny the depth of suffering. Instead, it enters into the suffering, sharing it, carrying it, transforming it. The broken heart finds healing not because the wound is ignored, but because love has chosen to dwell within it, making what seemed unbearable into a place where divine presence is known. Consider the impossibility of mending glass shattered into countless fragments. No craftsman could ever piece together every shard to restore its former beauty. Yet God does what no craftsman can do. He does not simply reconstruct the broken heart as it once was. He remakes it entirely, turning its weakness into strength, its emptiness into fullness, its grief into a vessel for deeper compassion. What looked ruined becomes a testimony to what cannot be ruined, the faithfulness of God and the endurance of His love. The word God speaks into the broken heart is not a command to forget, nor an instruction to pretend. It is the assurance, I am with you. This word carries power, because presence is the greatest healing. The soul that once cried out in loneliness discovers that it has never been alone, not even in its darkest hour. And once this word is received, the heart begins to beat again with new purpose. It learns that suffering itself can be transformed into a doorway through which light enters. To believe this is to attempt the impossible, because our human reason insists that shattered things remain shattered. But the divine word overturns that logic. It whispers that nothing is too broken for God, nothing too lost, nothing too painful. Healing does not always mean removal of the scar, for scars are reminders that love endured. Healing means the scar itself is transfigured, no longer a mark of defeat, but a mark of redemption. Thus, the word God uses to heal broken hearts is not spoken once and then finished. It continues, echoing in every prayer, every act of grace, every quiet strength given when despair should have had the final word. And in time, the heart that thought itself incapable of joy finds that joy has returned, not the shallow joy that ignores suffering, but the deeper joy born of having walked through it with God. God's word of love enters the deepest wounds, not by erasing pain, but by transforming it into a place of His presence. When the heart breaks, it often feels as though nothing can mend it. Pain runs so deep that it convinces us there is no way forward, that the damage is permanent, that no word, no comfort, no hand extended can possibly reach the shattered pieces within. Yet the reality of God's word of love is that it enters the very center of our wounds, not as a denial of their depth, but as a presence that transforms them. Love is not a fleeting comfort or a sentimental notion that evaporates when tested. Love, as spoken by God, is a force so profound that it permeates the darkest corners of grief and sorrow, reaching into places that human words cannot. It is not a love that stands far off and offers platitudes. It is a love that steps into the very suffering itself and chooses to remain there, carrying the weight alongside us. This is why it heals not by erasing the pain, but by sanctifying it with presence. Imagine the heart as a fragile vessel, cracked by loss, disappointment, or betrayal. Human instinct urges us to seal the cracks, to pretend the breaks are not there, to cover them with distraction or pride. Yet God does something different. Into those very cracks, He pours His love, and the broken lines become channels where light can enter. Rather than hiding the wounds, His love fills them, so that what was once empty now overflows with a strength not our own. The healing is not immediate in the way we often long for. Instead, it is deep, steady, and transformative. The pain remains real, but the despair that once seemed inevitable gives way to hope, because the presence of God inhabits the wound. We often believe that healing means returning to how things were before, as though God's task is to rewind time or undo the shattering. But His way is higher. He does not turn back the clock. He makes all things new. The broken heart does not simply become what it once was. It becomes more. It becomes stronger, more tender, more attuned to the reality of His grace. Love does not erase the scar, it redeems it. And the scar becomes a testimony, not of ruin, but of resilience, not of abandonment, but of presence. In this way, God's word of love changes not only the state of the heart, but also the meaning of the suffering itself. What once seemed senseless becomes a place of encounter with the divine. Consider how love responds differently from human attempts at comfort. Human comfort tries to minimize pain with explanations or promises of brighter days. God's love does not minimize. It magnifies the truth that He is with us, here and now, in the depth of our pain. His word does not speak from a distance. It draws near. This nearness is what allows the heart to endure what it could not on its own. And it is in this nearness that the impossible begins to take shape. The heart begins to believe again, begins to hope again, begins to live again. The transformation is not that the wound never happened, but that the wound has become a meeting place between the broken and the eternal. The healing that comes through God's word of love is therefore not superficial, but foundational. It reaches into the deepest wounds, claiming them not as places of defeat, but as places of His presence. It teaches the heart that its suffering is not the final chapter, but rather the soil in which new life can grow. What felt like the end becomes the beginning of something that could never have existed without the breaking. Love, spoken by God, proves itself to be stronger than despair, more enduring than sorrow, and capable of transforming even the darkest night into a dawn. That no shadow can overcome brokenness is not the end. God remakes the heart into something stronger, using scars as testimonies of redemption. Brokenness often appears to us as final, as though once something has shattered it can never be whole again. The human heart, when wounded by betrayal, loss, or disappointment, feels like a vessel that has slipped from our grasp and smashed beyond repair. The natural response is to gather the fragments in despair, convinced that they can never be restored, that the beauty which once was is gone forever. Yet God looks at those same fragments and does not see the end. He sees the beginning of something new, something more radiant than what was before. His way of healing is not simply to return the heart to its former state, but to remake it into something stronger, more beautiful, and more enduring, so that even the scars that remain become testimonies of redemption. The way God remakes the heart is unlike any earthly restoration. When a human craftsman repairs a broken piece, the goal is often to conceal the damage, to hide the cracks so it appears untouched. But God does not work in this way. His work of love is not about erasure, it is about transformation. The scars are not hidden, they are redeemed. They become part of the story, part of the design, and instead of diminishing the heart, they magnify His grace. The brokenness becomes the canvas on which His power is displayed. Each scar tells a story, not of weakness, but of the God who entered the weakness and made it strong. We often wish for God to remove the pain entirely, to wipe away the evidence that we ever fell, ever failed, ever suffered. But He chooses a different path, a path that is more profound. By leaving the scars, he allows them to serve as reminders that we are not abandoned, that what we thought would destroy us became instead the very thing through which he revealed his love most deeply. Scars bear witness. They whisper to others that healing is possible, that life can emerge from brokenness, that what looks ruined can become holy. In this way, God not only remakes our hearts for ourselves, but equips us to speak hope into the lives of others who are hurting. The heart that once thought itself unworthy or unusable becomes a vessel of comfort and strength for those still in darkness. The process of being remade is not easy. It requires surrender, the willingness to let God handle the fragments rather than clutching them tightly in fear. We often resist, thinking we can fix ourselves, thinking that if we work hard enough, we can piece things back together. But the harder we try, the more we see that our efforts only emphasize the cracks. True healing only comes when we release control and allow God to do the impossible. His hands, scarred themselves by love, know exactly how to handle what is broken. In his hands, the heart is not only mended, but made new. This remaking reveals a divine paradox. What we thought disqualified us actually becomes the very place where God's power is most evident. Weakness turns into testimony, failure into wisdom, grief into compassion. The broken heart becomes stronger not because the pain has vanished, but because it has been infused with God's presence. Where once there was despair, there is now endurance. Where once there was emptiness, there is now fullness. The heart that has been remade is not fragile, for it knows the depth of God's sustaining love. It is not bitter, for it has tasted grace in the midst of sorrow. It is not hopeless, for it has seen the impossible take shape within itself. In every scar, there is a mark of redemption, a reminder that brokenness was never the end, but the place where God began his most beautiful work. The impossible becomes possible when God speaks, "I am with you," turning despair into hope and sorrow into joy. The human mind often insists that what is broken must remain broken, that despair will always have the last word, and that sorrow, once it settles in, cannot be lifted. This is the logic of human limitation, a reasoning born from what our eyes can see and our hands can touch. Yet God speaks differently. Into the silence of pain and the heaviness of grief, he speaks the words, "I am with you." These words are not merely comfort, but a declaration of divine presence that changes the very nature of suffering. What seems impossible to endure becomes possible when the heart realizes it is not walking alone. Despair begins to loosen its grip, and hope stirs again like a fragile flame that refuses to be extinguished. The presence of God does not always remove the sorrow, but it redefines it. When the heart hears his voice declaring companionship in the midst of pain, the burden that once crushed now becomes bearable. Loneliness, which so often deepens the wound, is broken by the assurance that there is one who has promised never to forsake us. This presence is not abstract or distant. It is as near as breath, as constant as heartbeat. The impossibility of surviving heartbreak gives way to the reality that strength greater than our own is carrying us forward. Hope in such moments is not the shallow hope of wishful thinking. It is the hope rooted in the unchanging nature of God, who cannot lie and who does not abandon. When he says, "I am with you," he is declaring more than proximity. He is declaring involvement. He is not standing on the outside observing suffering. He is in the midst of it, shaping it, redeeming it, using it as a pathway toward joy that is deeper than what came before. This is why sorrow itself can be transformed into something unexpected. It becomes not the enemy of joy, but the soil in which joy grows. Out of tears springs compassion. Out of loss comes a capacity to treasure what is eternal. Out of pain emerges a strength that could not have existed without the trial. The transformation of despair into hope is nothing short of miraculous. It is the impossible made possible, not by human determination, but by divine promise. The heart that once felt empty begins to find that it beats again with new rhythm. It dares to believe again, even if trembling. It dares to trust that tomorrow can hold light, even though yesterday was dark. This daring is not naive. It is born of the realization that God's word is not bound by human limitation. His voice has power to bring life where death seemed final, to bring peace where turmoil raged, to bring joy where sorrow seemed unending. What makes this transformation profound is that it does not erase sorrow, but carries it into a larger story. The heart remembers loss, yet alongside the memory is the assurance of presence, the proof of love that never departed. This is not forgetting but redeeming, not denying but transcending. The words "I am with you" echo through every shadowed valley, and they are strong enough to shift the entire weight of grief. The one who was certain they could not go on discovers that they are moving forward, upheld by strength not their own. The one who thought joy would never return discovers that joy has quietly taken root again, not in spite of sorrow, but through it. In this way, the impossible becomes reality. Sorrow that seemed permanent is reshaped into joy that cannot be stolen. Despair that threatened to consume is transformed into testimony of hope. All of this rests on the simple yet immeasurably powerful word spoken by God into the broken heart. I am with you.